The stars looked different from this far out. Commander John Mitchell stood at the view screen of the Earth ship Endeavour, watching the unfamiliar constellations. Humanity had finally achieved reliable interstellar travel in 2087, and now, just 3 months later, they were about to meet the neighbors. "Commander, we're receiving coordinates for final approach," said Lieutenant Ben Hayes from the navigation console. John nodded. "Take us in, Lieutenant." "Nice and easy." The Endeavour glided toward Council Station Alpha, a massive structure that resembled a gleaming metal snowflake. Each of its 12 arms stretched nearly 5 miles long. Ships of various designs moved around it like bees around a hive. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Laura Reed. "There must be thousands of different vessels out there. And now one of them is human," John said with pride. Ambassador Susan Harris stood beside him, smoothing her blue diplomatic uniform. She had practiced her speech for weeks, working with Earth's best linguists to ensure the universal translators would convey their message clearly. "Remember," Susan told the bridge crew, "we represent all of humanity today. The Galactic Council has been watching us for decades. They know we advanced from our first moon landing to interstellar travel in just over a century. That scares them." John raised an eyebrow. "Should it?" Susan smiled. "Maybe. We did what took most species thousands of years." The docking procedure went smoothly. John led the diplomatic team of 12 humans through the airlock and into the station. The air smelled clean but slightly sweet, and the gravity felt lighter than Earth's. A delegation waited for them. The aliens represented 5 different species: a tall, willowy being with 4 arms, a short, stocky creature with metallic scales, 2 humanoids with purple skin and no visible ears, and what appeared to be a floating jellyfish encased in a transparent shell. "Welcome to Council Space," said the willowy being. "I am High Counselor Zex Lathar of the Mrithi. We have observed your species with great interest." Susan stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Susan Harris of Earth. We come seeking friendship and knowledge." The Council representatives led them through vast corridors filled with members of dozens of species. Some stared openly at the humans. Others whispered among themselves. The main council chamber was enormous, with seating for hundreds. Representatives from 317 species had gathered to witness humanity's introduction. Many species looked surprisingly similar to creatures from Earth's oceans or insects, while others defied description. Susan delivered Earth's introduction with confidence, explaining humanity's history, values, and hopes for the future. The chamber remained silent throughout her speech. When she finished, High Counselor Zex Lathar approached with a data tablet. "As is customary, we present the Integration Treaty. All new species must accept these terms to join the galactic community." John watched as Susan reviewed the document. Her face grew increasingly troubled as she read. "This would limit Earth's military development," she said, "and restrict our resource acquisition to Council-approved systems. It would place quotas on our population growth and require Council approval for all new technologies." "These are standard terms," Zex Lathar said. "The Council has maintained galactic peace for 30,000 years through such agreements." Susan looked at John, who gave her a slight nod. With deliberate movements, Susan took the physical copy of the treaty that had been prepared for the ceremony. She tore it in half, then in quarters. The sound of tearing paper echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the hall. Several council members rose to their feet in outrage. "Humanity does not submit," Susan said clearly. "We negotiate as equals or not at all." "This is unprecedented." Zex Lathar's voice shook with anger. "No species has ever rejected the Integration Treaty." "Then perhaps it's time for new traditions," Susan replied calmly. "Earth is willing to discuss fair and mutual agreements that respect our sovereignty." A council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives argued among themselves. John leaned closer to Susan. "That went well," he said with a slight smile. Susan watched the panicked council members. "This is just the beginning. They've never faced a species that wasn't willing to bow down to their rules. "What happens now?" asked Laura. John looked at the chaotic scene before them. "Now we see what happens when a 30,000-year-old system meets something new." 6 months after the diplomatic incident, Captain Lisa Wright stood on the bridge of the ECS Venture, Earth's first independent trading vessel. The ship floated at the edge of Krith space, waiting for permission to dock at their trading station. "Any response yet?" Lisa asked her communications officer. Gary Nelson shook his head. "Nothing yet, Captain. The Council sanctions are making everyone nervous about dealing with us." Lisa frowned. After Susan Harris tore up the integration treaty, the Galactic Council had imposed harsh trade restrictions on Earth. They expected humans to come crawling back, begging for acceptance. They didn't understand humanity very well. "We have an incoming transmission," Gary said suddenly. "It's from the Krith station." The view screen flickered to life, showing a reptilian face with golden scales and 4 blinking eyes. "Earth vessel, this is Station Commander Vrex. You may dock at Bay 12. Please use discretion. Council observers are present." Lisa smiled. "Thank you, Commander. We appreciate your hospitality." The Venture glided into the massive space station. Lisa had studied the Krith extensively. They were merchants to their core, and the Council's trade restrictions had hurt their economy for centuries. Earth goods might be officially sanctioned, but that only made them more valuable on the open market. As Lisa led her team from the ship, a tall, blue-skinned alien approached. His flowing robes marked him as a council representative. "Captain Wright," he said coldly. "I am Zix Toril, Council Trade Observer. I must inform you that any unauthorized commerce will result in severe penalties for all involved." Lisa smiled pleasantly. "I'm simply here to introduce myself to our galactic neighbors. Cultural exchange isn't prohibited, is it?" Zix Toril's eyes narrowed. "We are watching you, human." After he left, Lisa's team set up in the station's market area. They displayed Earth art, music recordings, and food samples, all technically cultural items, not trade goods. But behind each station, quiet conversations took place about future cultural exchanges that might include Earth technology and resources. By evening, Lisa sat in a private room with Vrex and 5 other Krith merchants. They sipped a sweet Krith beverage as they talked business. "The Council has controlled galactic trade for 12,000 years, said Vrex. "Their system benefits the founding species while keeping the rest of us dependent." Lisa nodded. "On Earth, we believe in free markets. Fair competition makes everyone stronger." She activated a small projector showing Earth's Economic Minister Alan Peterson. His recorded message was brief but powerful. "The solar dollar is backed by Earth's resources and labor. Unlike the galactic credit, we don't manipulate its value to benefit certain species. Any world trading with Earth gets fair value, guaranteed." The Krith merchants looked at each other. One of them, a female named Shrix, spoke up. "The Council will retaliate. They always do." "Let them," said Lisa. "Earth isn't alone anymore. We've already made contact with the Juvari and the Tellarites. They're interested in our offer too." Back on Earth, corporate negotiator Kevin Dias was presenting similar deals to representatives from 15 different worlds. Earth businesses offered better terms than the Council had in millennia. The Council's Economic Committee met in emergency session. The galactic credit had shown its first signs of instability in 12,000 years as species began to quietly hold solar dollars in reserve. "This is outrageous," said Chief Economist Brieltans. "These humans undermine systems that have kept the galaxy stable for eons." High Counselor Zexalathar stared at the economic projections. "They're offering better terms to resource-rich worlds at the edge of our influence. Those worlds are considering their offers." "How can we stop this?" asked another council member. Zexalathar's expression darkened. "The integration treaty exists for a reason. New species must be controlled until they understand their place. Humanity refuses to learn this lesson." On the Venture, Lisa received an encrypted message from Earth. Operation Free Market was succeeding beyond all expectations. 23 worlds had signed preliminary trade agreements. The Council's economic dominance was facing its first real challenge. Lisa looked out at the stars. The Council had expected humans to give up and accept their terms. Instead, humanity had found another way. They always did. "Captain," said Gary, "we have requests from 3 more trading stations to visit next." Lisa smiled. "Set course for the first one. The galaxy is about to change." Admiral Grace Williams stood on the bridge of the EDF Defender, watching the stars through the main view screen. 2 years had passed since Earth's first contact with the Galactic Council. In that time, humanity had established a defensive perimeter around their solar system and nearby colonies. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts approaching from Council space," reported Sensor Officer Paul Green. "Looks like 5 dreadnoughts." Grace nodded calmly. "Send the standard greeting. Remind them they're approaching Earth-controlled space." The Council's military response to Earth's independence had been slow but steady. Their ships would approach Earth's borders, scan their defenses, and report back. Each time, they pushed a little closer. "They're responding," said Communications Officer Debbie Ward. "Council Military Commander Brel Vantar says they're conducting routine exercises." Grace smiled. "In our territory. How convenient." On the main screen, the Council ships appeared, massive vessels that dwarfed Earth's fleet. Each dreadnought was nearly 2 miles long, bristling with weapons that had kept the peace in Council space for 5,000 years. "They've been using the same ship designs for millennia," said Grace's second-in-command, Captain Steve Jones. "Their tactics haven't changed either." "That's their weakness," Grace replied. "They haven't faced a real challenge in thousands of years." The lead Council ship suddenly accelerated, crossing the boundary into Earth space. "They've entered our territory," Paul reported. "Looks like they're claiming it was a navigation error." Grace's expression hardened. "Activate shield disruptors. Target their propulsion systems only." Earth scientists had studied Council technology and discovered a weakness in their defensive systems. The shield disruptors fired, sending invisible waves of energy toward the lead dreadnought. Its engines flickered and died. "What just happened?" asked Steve, watching the crippled ship drift helplessly. "We changed the rules," Grace answered. "Send a message to Commander Brel Vantar. Tell him we'll be happy to tow his ship back to Council space after he apologizes for the intrusion." Across the border in Krith territory, Major Ryan Clark led a small Earth force protecting Krith civilian transports. The Council had labeled the Krith economic rebels for their trade deals with Earth, and Council peacekeepers had begun harassing Krith ships. 3 Council cutters approaching the transport, warned Ryan's tactical officer. Ryan looked at the civilian ship carrying Krith families. "Move to intercept. Weapons hot but hold fire unless they shoot first." The Earth ships, smaller but faster than Council vessels, formed a protective barrier around the transport. The Council ships slowed, not expecting resistance. "They're opening communications," said Ryan's communications officer. A stern Council commander appeared on screen. "Human vessels, this is a Council security operation. Interference will be considered an act of war." Ryan stepped forward. "This is a civilian transport in Krith space. Your presence here without permission is the only illegal act. Withdraw immediately." When the Council ships opened fire, Ryan's squadron was ready. Earth ships darted between laser blasts, returning precise fire that disabled the Council vessels without destroying them. In the Council War College, a facility that hadn't been used in 3,000 years, military leaders gathered to study these encounters. "They fight unpredictably," said one general. "Their tactics change with each engagement." Brel Vantar, now back from his humiliating encounter with Admiral Williams, pounded the table. "They're barbarians. They refuse to follow proper battle protocols." An older Council strategist shook his head. "No, they're innovators. Our military doctrine hasn't changed in 5 millennia. We've grown complacent." On Earth, Grace met with representatives from the Krith and 3 other species who had signed defense pacts with humanity. Together, they shared technology and tactics. The Council believes military might gives them the right to bully smaller worlds. Grace told the gathering. We disagree. A Krith military leader named Frex nodded. For too long, we accepted their dominance. Earth has shown us there is another way. As the meeting ended, Grace received a message. Council dreadnoughts had withdrawn from Earth's borders. For the first time in thousands of years, the Council's military had backed down. The galaxy was changing, one small victory at a time. Chief Engineer Olivia Martinez floated in zero gravity, making final adjustments to the transmitter array. Through her helmet visor, she could see Earth shining like a blue jewel below. 5 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, and Earth was about to change galactic society once again. How's it looking up there, Olivia? Asked Control over the radio. Almost done, she replied, tightening the last connection. The interstellar network is almost ready to go live. For 2 years, Olivia had led the team developing faster-than-light communication technology. The Council had similar technology, but kept it tightly controlled, limiting information flow between worlds. Earth's system would be different, open to all who wanted access. Back on the station, Olivia joined Professor Daniel Green in the control room. Daniel had created thousands of hours of educational content that would be freely available across Council space. Ready to make history? He asked with a smile. Olivia nodded. The Council won't be happy about this. That's becoming a theme with us humans, Daniel laughed. They activated the system. Across hundreds of worlds, receivers built by Earth or their new allies picked up the signal. For the first time, species could communicate directly without Council monitoring or filters. On the Council homeworld, Infomaster Krelixen stared at reports flooding in. This is unacceptable. They're broadcasting directly to our citizens. His assistant looked worried. The broadcasts contain educational materials, entertainment, news from non-Council sources, and open forums where different species can communicate freely. Shut it down immediately, ordered Krelixen. But Council information systems, designed for control rather than innovation, couldn't block Earth's signals. The technology was too new, too different from what they understood. Frank Powell led a team of Earth's best computer experts, working to keep the network open. When Council systems tried to block their signals, Frank's team found new pathways. They're still thinking in terms of central control, Frank told his team. Our network is distributed. Block one node, and 10 more take its place. Across Council space, citizens began accessing information freely for the first time. Young members of Council species were particularly interested in Earth's ideas about freedom of information and speech. On the planet Vex, a group of young Council citizens gathered secretly to discuss what they were learning. Did you know the Council altered our history books? Asked one. The Krith were founding members of the Council, but were later demoted when they disagreed with new policies. Another added, Earth's educational programs show scientific advancements the Council has been hiding from us, technologies that could help our people. On hundreds of worlds, similar conversations took place. Questions were being asked that hadn't been raised in generations. The Council called an emergency session. High Counselor Zex Lathar looked grim as he addressed the gathering. These humans undermine the very fabric of our society. Their network spreads dangerous ideas. Their talk of freedom and equal rights threatens the stability we've maintained for millennia. A younger Council member stood up. Perhaps we should consider that stability through control isn't the only way forward. Many of our citizens find Earth's openness appealing. Zexalathar's expression darkened. You've been listening to human broadcasts, haven't you? Back on Earth, Olivia monitored the network's growth. New species joined daily, eager to share their knowledge and culture without Council restrictions. We've just had requests from 20 more worlds to install relay stations, she told Daniel. He nodded, looking at a map showing the network's spread across the galaxy. The Council built their power on controlling information. They never considered what would happen when that control disappeared. In her office, Ambassador Susan Harris received reports from Earth diplomats throughout Council space. The information revolution was having a greater impact than anyone expected. Species that had accepted Council dominance for thousands of years were beginning to question, to demand more. "Information wants to be free," Susan murmured, remembering an old Earth saying. And now it finally is. Across the galaxy, the Council's grip on power, maintained through millennia of controlled communication, began to weaken, and it had taken humanity just 5 years to spark the change. Senior diplomat Patricia Butler stood at the window of Earth's newest embassy, looking out at the strange purple skies of the planet Zora. 10 years had passed since Earth's first contact with the Galactic Council. In that time, Patricia had helped open 50 Earth embassies on worlds throughout Council space. "Madam Diplomat, the Zoran leaders have arrived," said her assistant, Sam Wells. Patricia nodded and moved to the meeting room, where 6 Zorans waited. They were tall, slender beings with skin that shifted colors based on their emotions. Currently, they all showed shades of excited green. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said. "Earth is honored to establish formal relations with Zora." The lead Zoran, Prime Speaker Callow, bowed slightly. "Many on our world have watched Earth's rise with great interest. Your refusal to accept Council dominance has inspired us." Patricia placed a data pad on the table. On it was Earth's proposed Sovereign Rights Accord, a new type of treaty that Earth had created as an alternative to the Council's Integration Treaty. "This agreement recognizes the absolute sovereignty of both our worlds," she explained. "It establishes trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense while guaranteeing non-interference in internal affairs." As the Zorans reviewed the document, a message arrived for Patricia. She stepped aside to read it. "Good news?" asked Sam, noting her smile. "The Krith just signed our accord," she replied. "That makes 28 species who have chosen our treaty over renewing their Council agreements." Across the galaxy, Council negotiator Vril Nexstar was attempting to salvage the situation. He sat in a meeting with representatives from the Juvari, a species whose Council membership was up for renewal. "We could modify certain aspects of the standard agreement," Vril Nexstar offered, something no Council negotiator had ever suggested before. "Perhaps allow more autonomy in your local governance." The Juvari representative tilted her head. "Interesting. However, Earth's Sovereign Rights Accord already offers us complete autonomy, equal trading rights, and mutual defense without Council oversight." Vril Nexstar's face darkened. "The humans lack our experience. The galaxy needs structure, rules, hierarchy. That's what has kept peace for 30,000 years. Has it been peace?" asked the Juvari, "or just compliance?" Back on the Council homeworld, Ambassador Jason Garcia hosted the first open forum, a meeting where any species could address grievances without Council filters or protocols. The massive hall was filled beyond capacity. "For too long, the Council has claimed to speak for all of us," Jason told the gathering. "Today, everyone has a voice." One by one, representatives from dozens of species spoke about Council restrictions, unfair trade policies, and military intimidation. Many had never been allowed to speak in official Council sessions. Inside the ancient Council chamber, empty seats began to appear. Species that had renewed their membership for thousands of years were now declining to do so. Young diplomats from Council worlds resigned in record numbers, many joining Earth's growing diplomatic corps. High Counselor Zexlafar called an emergency session with the remaining loyal members. "This human infection spreads," he said angrily. "They offer freedom without responsibility, equality without order. They don't understand that some species must lead and others must follow." A younger Council member spoke up. "Perhaps that's precisely what they understand and reject." On Earth, the President met with Patricia and other senior diplomats via secure link. The council structure is showing serious signs of fracture, Patricia reported. Species that have been under council control for thousands of years are asserting their independence. Any backlash? Asked the president. Jason nodded. Council hardliners are pushing for military action, but they're losing support. Many of their own military commanders have begun questioning orders. What happens if the council actually falls? Someone asked. Patricia looked thoughtful. 30,000 years of galactic history suggests chaos would follow. But 30,000 years of Earth history suggests something else, that free people can form unions that respect each member's rights. Across council space, the diplomatic landscape was transforming. The council chamber, unchanged for 15,000 years, saw new species take seats without council approval, forming new alliances based on Earth's model of mutual respect rather than enforced hierarchy. The age of council dominance was ending, not with a war, but with a simple idea that every species deserved the same respect that humanity had demanded for itself. The Grand Hall on planet Krith was packed with beings from dozens of worlds. They had come to see the work of Maria Rodriguez, an Earth artist who had created something new in the galaxy. Collaborative art that combined styles and techniques from multiple species. Maria stood beside her latest creation, a floating sculpture that changed colors and shapes as viewers moved around it. She had worked with artists from 7 different species to create it. It speaks to all of us differently, she explained to the crowd, just as the galaxy looks different from each of our worlds. 15 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. In that time, Earth culture had spread throughout the stars, bringing new ideas to societies that had remained unchanged for millennia. Council Cultural Preservation Director Thel Mover watched from the back of the hall, his face grim. For 12,000 years, the Council had carefully controlled cultural exchange between species. They believed it kept societies stable and prevented conflicts based on misunderstanding. This human art mixes too many influences, he told his assistant. It will confuse people, make them question their own cultural identity. His assistant, younger and more open-minded, disagreed. Or it might help us understand each other better. Across the galaxy, Earth's influence continued to grow. On the planet Vex, Chef Andrew Nelson opened his 3rd restaurant featuring Earth cuisine, mixed with local ingredients. Lines formed every day as council citizens waited to taste foods their government had never allowed them to try before. Food brings people together, Andrew told a reporter from the Earth News Network. It's hard to fear someone after you've shared a meal with them. In the sports arena on Juvari Prime, crowds cheered as teams played a modified version of basketball. The game had been adjusted to account for different body types and gravity preferences, allowing multiple species to compete together. Coach Bill Foster watched from the sidelines as his mixed-species team worked together to score points. The Juvari player passed to a Krith, who spun around a Tellarite defender to score. They said different species couldn't play together, Bill told a group of young aliens watching the game. They were wrong. On 200 worlds, cultural festivals celebrated both local and Earth traditions. Music, art, food, and ideas flowed freely between species that had been kept separate by council policy for thousands of years. On the council homeworld, historian Eric Butler presented his documentary, Council Origins, to a packed auditorium. Using records he had discovered in ancient archives, Eric revealed that the founding species of the Council had originally intended it to be a forum of equals. The Council began as a partnership, he explained. The hierarchy and control came later, as certain species gained power over others. Many in the audience looked shocked. This version of history contradicted everything they had been taught. After the presentation, a young council citizen approached Eric. If what you say is true, then the current council has betrayed its original purpose. Eric nodded. Systems often drift from their founding principles. The question is whether they can find their way back. In his office on the council homeworld, Thelmover drafted yet another proposal to ban human cultural imports. It was his 6th attempt. The previous 5 had been rejected by younger council members who had embraced the cultural exchange. "Don't you see what's happening?" he asked his colleagues. "These humans are changing the very fabric of our society." A younger council member named Zrel smiled. "Yes, that's precisely what's happening, and many of us welcome it." Later that evening, Zrel attended a secret meeting with other reform-minded council members. They discussed ideas that would have been unthinkable just 15 years ago. Elections, free expression, individual rights. "Earth has shown us another way to live," said one attendee. "Not through conquest, but through example." Across the stars, in millions of homes on countless worlds, citizens watched Earth entertainment, ate Earth food, played Earth games, and most importantly, discussed Earth ideas. The concept that individuals had rights, that governments should serve their people rather than control them, spread like wildfire through a galaxy ready for change. The Council's cultural dominance, maintained for longer than Earth's entire recorded history, was fading, not through war or force, but through better ideas freely shared. The Grand Council chamber was divided, literally. On one side sat the traditionalists, led by High Counselor HFY. On the other side were the reformers, led by Zrel. 20 years had passed since humanity's first contact, and the Galactic Council faced its first real challenge in millennia. "The time has come for change," said Zrel, standing to address the chamber. "I propose restructuring the Council based on Earth's federal model. Equal representation for all member species, with rotating leadership and transparent voting." Angry shouts erupted from the traditionalist side. Zexlather rose, his 4 arms raised for silence. "This is madness," he said. "Our system has maintained peace for 30,000 years. These human ideas of democracy and equality sound appealing, but they lead to chaos. Some species must guide others who lack the wisdom to guide themselves." Kelly Harrison, Earth's chief negotiator, sat quietly at the back of the chamber. In recent months, she had spent countless hours mediating between council factions. She knew both sides were deeply entrenched. "The vote will now begin," announced the session moderator. One by one, representatives cast their votes. The result was almost evenly split, with reformers holding a slim majority. Zexlathar's face darkened. "This session is adjourned until tomorrow," he said abruptly, leaving with his supporters. Later that night, alarms blared throughout the council capital. Armed forces loyal to the traditionalists had seized key government buildings. The coup had begun. Kelly received an urgent message from Zrel. "They're arresting reformers. Military forces have surrounded the embassy district." She immediately contacted Earth. "The situation has deteriorated. Request immediate evacuation for council reformers seeking asylum." Captain Peter Scott received the message aboard the EDF Liberty. His orders came through minutes later. "Lead a multinational fleet to evacuate threatened reformers from the Council homeworld. All ships prepare for emergency jump to Council space," he ordered. "This is not a combat mission. We extract our people and any asylum seekers, then withdraw." The Earth fleet, joined by ships from the Krith, Juvari, and dozens of other allies, arrived at the Council homeworld 12 hours later. By then, fighting had broken out between military units loyal to different factions. "Captain, we're receiving distress calls from multiple locations," reported his communications officer. Peter nodded grimly. "Deploy shuttle teams to all coordinates. Priority is saving lives, not taking sides in their civil conflict." Earth shuttles, escorted by fighter craft, descended to the planet's surface. At the Earth Embassy, Kelly coordinated the evacuation of hundreds of reformist council members and their families. "We never wanted this," said Zrel as he boarded a shuttle with his family. "We only asked for equality." Council orbital defense platforms suddenly powered up, targeting the evacuation fleet. "All ships, defensive positions," ordered Peter. "Protect the civilian transports." Before the platforms could fire, they unexpectedly powered down. On the command channel, A council military officer appeared. Captain Scott, this is Admiral Krell. Many in the military do not support this coup. We have disabled the defense grid. Complete your evacuation. As the last transports lifted off, Kelly looked back at the council capital. Fires burned in several districts. The oldest government in the galaxy was tearing itself apart. 1 week later, representatives from 112 species gathered on Earth. One by one, they formally withdrew from the council, forming a new alliance called the Galactic Cooperative. Zrel Tavik, now leading the reformist government in exile, addressed the gathering. For 30,000 years, the council claimed to speak for all sentient beings. Today, we speak for ourselves. On the council homeworld, Zexalathar and the remaining loyalists declared the reformers traitors. We will restore order to the galaxy, he announced to his diminished audience, by force if necessary. The council fleet, still powerful despite defections, prepared for war. But as they marshaled their forces, they received disturbing news. 150 ships from as many species had formed a defensive line around Council Station Prime. The message from this multinational fleet was simple. The age of Council dominance is over. Any attempt to reimpose it by force will be met with united resistance. For the first time in recorded history, the Council faced opposition it could not simply crush or outblast. A new era had begun. The new Galactic Assembly Hall gleamed under the light of twin suns. Built on a neutral world, it had been designed to accommodate representatives from all known species. Unlike the old council chamber with its hierarchical seating, this hall was arranged in a perfect circle. Chief Justice Nancy Miller stood at the center of this circle, addressing the first formal session of the reformed galactic government. 25 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the stars. We gather today not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, Nancy said. The Galactic Assembly replaces the Council, with rotating leadership and equal voting rights for all member species. In the 5 years since the Council had fractured, a new order had emerged. The brief conflict that followed had ended not with a decisive battle, but with the collapse of the Council's support. When faced with united opposition, most Council worlds had simply stopped following orders from the central government. Our first act must be to establish the rule of law, Nancy continued. Not laws imposed from above, but justice agreed upon by all. Seated among the Earth delegation, John Mitchell, now much older than when he had first witnessed humanity's introduction to the stars, watched with pride. The journey had not been easy, but the galaxy had transformed in ways few could have imagined. On a view screen visible to all, the last Council hardliners surrendered their weapons. Led by Zexalathar, they had held out on a distant outpost until their supplies and support had finally run out. The defendants will receive fair trials, Nancy assured the Assembly. Unlike the old Council, we do not punish political opposition with execution. Justice must be tempered with mercy. Earth's President Carl Johnson rose to address the gathering next. At 72, he had spent most of his career dealing with interstellar politics. 25 years ago, humanity entered the galactic stage, he began. We were told to submit to rules we had no part in creating, to accept our place in a hierarchy thousands of years old. We refused. Murmurs of agreement came from many delegations, but our refusal was not merely rejection. We offered alternatives, not just for ourselves, but for all who wished to live with dignity and freedom. Carl gestured to the assembled representatives. Nearly 500 species were present, more than had ever participated in Council governance. Look around you. This assembly includes species that withdrew from galactic affairs centuries ago, disgusted by Council policies. It includes species the Council classified as primitive and unworthy of representation. It includes the youngest spacefaring races and the most ancient, all with the same voice, the same vote. From her seat among the Krith delegation, Lisa Wright, the captain who had helped begin Earth's economic challenge to the Council, smiled. The Krith had regained their place as equals, not subjects. Humanity did not conquer the Council, Carl continued. We simply reminded the galaxy of principles long forgotten, that people everywhere deserve self-determination, that diversity brings strength, and that cooperation works better than domination. After the session, a reception allowed representatives to mingle informally. Species that had been kept separate by council policy for millennia now exchanged ideas freely. Susan Harris, the ambassador who had first torn up the integration treaty, now walked with assistance. Age had not diminished her spirit. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out this way?" asked a young diplomat. Susan smiled. "Not exactly this way. But I knew the council's system couldn't last. No society can thrive when most of its members are denied a voice." Across the room, a group of ancient beings entered, representatives of races so old they had withdrawn from galactic affairs thousands of years before humanity achieved spaceflight. They had watched the rise and fall of the council from afar, choosing isolation rather than submission. Now they had returned, impressed by the new order emerging from the council's collapse. One of them, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form, approached Susan. "We observe your species' arrival with interest," it said in a melodious voice. "Many have challenged the council before. All eventually submitted or were destroyed. You found another way." Susan nodded. "Humans can be stubborn when told to kneel." "A valuable trait," the ancient being replied. "The galaxy has been locked in stagnation for too long. Perhaps this new age of freedom will bring the growth and diversity we once hoped for." As the reception continued, representatives from hundreds of worlds celebrated not conquest, but rebirth. The Galactic Council had trembled, then fallen, not before human weapons, but human ideas.